Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1807A, and today's date is March 9th, 2019, and the title of the episode is, It Has Begun, the Central Bank Independence is Being Questioned. Now, don't you just love it when you find a $20 bill in a jacket pocket you haven't worn in ages, or a purse you've not used for a long time? Well, imagine this, finding hundreds of dollars in the papers that are sitting in your file cabinet. I'm talking about that old 401k paperwork. That money is sitting there doing nothing. Our friends at Noble Gold can cast an eye over that lost paperwork and see if you qualify for a precious metals IRA with it. So they're offering one of these special Morgan Silver dollars for all qualified IRAs above $20,000. So dig out the old paperwork and click the link below to get started on your gold IRA. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Well, it looks like it has begun. And the central banks, they are worried about their independence. They're worried about political leaders questioning what they do or placing other individuals in the positions that were meant for insiders. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment. But first, I wanted to talk about the economy and how the central bank economy is ripping itself apart. They're completely exposed right now. And Trump is racing against the clock to set everything in motion for the transition. And he needs to keep the entire economic system together until the elections are over. So this is a huge task right now, and we know that he has the magic wand. We know he can keep the market up. We know that they can continually manipulate the numbers. But we also know that this illusionary economy that the central bankers have created, it is hurting the everyday person. But Trump just can't throw a switch, shut it off, and say, okay, let's move into a completely new system, because the entire system would collapse under the weight of debt. And then what do people do? Now, this is what the central bankers were planning to do. They were planning to bring everything down, and whoever got hurt, got hurt. They don't really care. Actually, they kind of like it because they buy up all the different assets for pennies on the dollar. And they make out after a crash. And also on the way down with the stock market and everything like that, they profit from it. But when we look at the economic data, we can see that a lot of things are happening all at once. We know that Trump has controlled the Fed, and they're not raising rates as of yet. We know this March they're going to meet. This will show if Trump truly has complete and utter control over the Federal Reserve. If Powell comes out and said, listen, we're going to be patient a little bit longer and we're not going to raise rates, Trump has pretty much, and the Patriots have full control over the Fed right now. Remember, there are still bad guys within the Fed. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of pushing and shoving that's going on right now because there are certain factions that want to bring down this system. But when we look at their economy, this is what they're so afraid of. This is why they want to bring it down sooner than later and blame it on Trump, because their entire system is completely falling apart. December new home sales, now they were expected to tumble, but thanks to a dramatic downward reversion in November's data, December came in at positive 3.7. It was expected to be down by 8.7%. November's initial 16.9% surge, the most since 1992, was revised down just to 9.1%. So you can see what's happening here. They're playing with the numbers. Now, we've seen this before, where they take the last month's data, they revise it down, the present month or the last month that they're recording on, that is pushed up, and it makes it seem like everything is fantastic. But new home sales are down year over year for the fourth straight month in a row. And if you look at the trajectory, and this is starting back in 2012, you can see that the new home sales, they are completely declining, and it's not improving at all. Again, Trump is racing against the clock. He knew when he came into office that the central bank, their entire economic system, was imploding on itself. But of course, what was he going to do when he first came into office? He could have said to everyone, listen, we're in a fake economy. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to default on the debt, and we're just going to have to let the chips fall where they may. Now, a lot of people would have gotten hurt. A lot of people were not prepared for this. So he didn't take that route. What he is doing right now is he's preparing the economy by getting rid of the globalist trade system, by bringing back manufacturing, by reworking a lot of the laws, by removing taxes, by removing a lot of the regulations. He needs to do this, and he needs to make a playing field that is even amongst the countries. These are the bilateral trade agreements that he is working out right now between many, many countries. Now, we have to remember the Fed is the mortal enemy of the young generation and the nation itself. The wealth effect was created by the Fed. The wealth effect enriched the already rich at the expense of the young who didn't get the opportunity to buy the assets the Fed has pushed to the moon at pre-bubble prices. That privilege was largely reserved for those who bought a decade or two ago. Now remember, in the beginning of a Federal Reserve system, any central bank system, it's fantastic in the beginning because people really think that, wow, I am making so much money. Remember, coming off a gold standard, they create a lot of currency. By creating a lot of currency, there's a lot of currency in circulation. You have inflation. They raise the interest rates. So you're making a lot on the money that's already out there. And all of a sudden, everyone sees their wages go up, housing prices go up, everything goes up, but all together. And everyone thinks, wow, this is fantastic. I'm doing fantastic. But the younger generation who's on the back end of the Federal Reserve central bank system, they don't feel this. They feel the opposite. And that's what people are feeling right now. Let's go back a little bit in time and let's take a look at household net worth. Household net worth soared from around 40 trillion in 2000 to 100 trillion in 2018, a gain of 60 trillion while the economy grew at a much more modest pace. Household net worth has leaped from 55 trillion in 2010 to 100 trillion in 2018, 45 trillion in gains for those who already owned stocks and houses. The wealth effect has benefited the haves at the expense of the have-nots. The young who can no longer afford to buy homes or start families unless mom and dad provide the capital. The nation is losing an entire generation as a result of the Fed's cargo cult-like obsession with boosting the wealth of the haves. The wealth effect is the most generationally lopsided policy possible, the equivalent of a tax on youth. How many millennials have seen their earned income match or exceed the sharp increases in rent, college tuition, and health care? Not many. And if you look back in time and you go back all the way to 1978, you can see the annual growth of hourly earnings has declined ever since then. Through the dot-com bubble, through the housing bubble, through the recovery. And rent, that has climbed between 30 and 50% since 2009. Has everyone's income gone up 30 to 50%? No, it has not. The Fed does not help the people. If you look at any graph or anything, you can see with the everyday person, wages, inflation, everything, the value of the dollar, it is destroyed over time by the Fed. And this is why we need to break away from the central bank system. Now, it looks like the Philippine president, Rodrigo Duterte, he decided to appoint a central banker from his cabinet. He didn't pick an insider. And the central bank is very worried about their independence. Basically, what we're seeing is that the president of the Philippines is trying to take control over the central bank system. Looks like they're going to be going through a restructuring. Now, central banks across Europe are finding that the golden era in which they were revered, well, it has passed. And I don't think they were ever revered. I think this is something they gave themselves. The great days of central bank independence, well, those days are gone. This is from a former Bank of England policymaker, Charles Goodhart, adding he thought the attacks on central banks are going to continue. The central bank, far from being seen as the only game in town to keep us from collapsing, is going to be seen as an enemy of the people, he said. And this is absolutely true. Remember, a couple of months ago, the IMF and the other central bank systems, they said the political establishment is starting to question their independence, and they don't like this. Trump has been questioning the Federal Reserve, and other nations are following in Trump's footsteps. And basically, the European central bankers, they're feeling Trump-style political heat. This is the beginning of a movement to restructure the central banks around the world. You just can't do it alone. You need the assistance from every country. And if you look, the globalist system, well, that is not working anymore for these elites. What's growing now across the nations with the yellow vests and all the other protests, Brexit, you name it, they're starting to realize and they're starting to wake up to what the real problem is. And that is the central bank. This is why you're seeing articles come out about, the political establishment is questioning our independence. We shouldn't bow to the political establishment. Yeah, you're going to bow to the will of the people. The people have the ultimate control. The people have the ultimate say. Yes, there was a time where the central bank was in control. Those days are gone. There's change in the wind. And once this change hits and it spreads throughout Europe, throughout the rest of Asia, throughout the world, the central bank days are numbered. Think about what has been going on. Since Trump has become president, Italy is fighting and pushing against the central bank. The Philippines is pushing against the central bank. The UK, before Trump came into office, they wanted the Brexit. They're pushing against the central bank establishment. Once the UK breaks away, other European countries are going to say you know what? We don't want this either. Actually, if we go back in time, Greece was pushing back at the central bank, but then Cyprus folded. But you can see there is movement, and it will continue, and it will get harder and harder for the central banks. Their days are numbered. There's a movement that has started, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. And if you have all of these countries out there questioning their private Western central bank system, questioning the IMF, questioning the Federal Reserve, it makes it a lot easier to take them down when all countries are working together and they're all doing the same thing. This movement is just going to grow. This movement has just begun. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.